Who in the world can claim to survive a clash with Xu Yifan's sword if they encounter him in the jianghu? Amidst disorderly troops, Cao Yan can shoot an arrow that pierces armor from dozens of zhang away with deadly accuracy. Who dares say they can dodge his shot? The people of the northern frontier grow up riding horses, and each year the king of scimitars claims countless heads. But if he puts on armor, who in the world dares to say they can withstand 100 moves against Chen Ziyi's spear? Heroes abound across the land, but who truly possesses the highest skill? When they all gather, who is the best in the world? Each setting may have its own champion. Since it's impossible to gather all the heroes together, I will determine the rankings from this stage. Today, let's discuss the heroes of the world. It's just my humble opinion. I hope everyone enjoys it. On stage, a frail storyteller spoke with rising and falling tones, his narration captivating the audience. However, a newly arrived spectator below was not quite satisfied. Can we hear something else today? What would you like to hear, dear guest? I heard someone encountered an immortal on Yunding Mountain again. At these words, the crowd's interest was piqued. Indeed, this was Pingzhu. The stories people loved most were about immortals, gods, monsters, and demons, especially those that were close by and seemingly real. But the storyteller on stage appeared troubled. He glanced at the regulars in the audience and said, "It's not that I don't want to tell it, but I just told that story in the last session. Many of the guests here haven't left yet. How can I take their money and make them listen to the same story twice?" As soon as the words left his mouth, a chorus of clinks and clatters filled the air. Someone had tossed a coin, prompting others to follow suit. Even pears from this year's early autumn harvest were all being thrown onto the stage. There were at least 100 coins and 7 or 8 pears in total. Oh my, thank you everyone, truly thank you. The storyteller quickly cupped his hands in gratitude, bowing as he carefully picked up each coin and piece of fruit, not leaving a single one behind. After collecting everything, he bowed again and said, "Since everyone wants to hear it, I'll tell it once more." He cleared his throat, wetted his lips, and began, "Do you all remember what happened last year? The newly appointed county magistrate of Shizu County came to climb Yunding Mountain here, only to disappear without a trace. Only one of his attendants made it down the mountain, and everyone assumed he either fell to his death while crossing the Yunding Mountain's iron chain or was devoured by the mountain's wild beasts, monsters, and spirits. This was no ordinary man. Though he was appointed magistrate in Shizu County, he was previously an official in the capital, well known in literary circles and connected with people all over the country. Even our own magistrate of Xianxia County went up the mountain to offer incense, and a noble from the commandery who had ties with him also came to offer incense on Yunding Mountain. But who could have guessed? A few days ago, he and his guards actually came down from the mountain. The crowd erupted in surprise and chatter, with those who had heard the story before already whispering the rest of the tale to those nearby. This is no hoax. The storyteller widened his eyes as he spoke. In the past, people who descended from Yunding Mountain claimed to have encountered immortals and gods. Now, I can't say whether those stories were true or false. There was always some truth mixed with lies, but no tale has ever been as credible as this one. This man was a demoted capital official. He had a reputation for his literary talents, not from a prominent family, but certainly not from a humble background either. He was missing for a full year, and everyone knew it. Before the new magistrate appointed by the court could even arrive, and before his family had finished their mourning, he reappeared. He had genuinely descended from the mountain. Who could fake something like that? The entire Shizu County has been buzzing with the news. Someone in the crowd immediately asked, "What did he say?" Have you ever heard the phrase, "a day in heaven, a year on earth"? The magistrate met an immortal and journeyed alongside him. When he grew tired atop the mountain, he slept for the whole night. When he awoke the next day, he thought he had only slept for a night, only to discover that he had slept from the 2nd year of Ming to the 3rd year. Isn't that incredible? The crowd erupted in a frenzy of chatter. Then a gentle voice asked, "Did his wives remarry?" "They did not," the storyteller replied after a pause. "Everyone, please quiet down. I have more details for you, which I heard directly from someone who came from Shizu County." The crowd instantly fell silent, eager to hear more. Though this story had spread far and wide, it was true that neither Xianxia nor his guards had revealed his name. They had indeed kept to their promise. Knowing this, and that Xianxia's wives had not remarried, the impact of the past year on him seemed minimal. Satisfied with this knowledge, Songyu stood up and left Arsadilla. Rumors of encountering an immortal would surely boost his reputation. If Xianxia were clever enough, he might even claim that the compilation of the great encyclopedia was done under the immortal's guidance, making it easier to gain the emperor's and the court's approval, as well as securing his position as the chief editor. This could serve as another form of compensation beyond the elixir. It was noisy inside the theater, but the outside remained quiet. The sun was shining just right, and the horse stood calmly in the stable. As Song Yu approached, the calico cat in his cloth bag seemed to recognize his footsteps and quickly poked its head out, staring at him curiously. "Did you finish listening?" "Yes, I did. I thought you would stay until nightfall." "Let's go." As the Taoist began to walk, the horse followed. They were indifferent to the noisy chatter behind them, which was still filled with talk of mountain gods and immortals. With these rumors, the legend of immortals on Yunding Mountain was likely to be solidified. Who knew how many people from all over the country would be drawn here, wasting their time on seeking immortals on Yunding Mountain? Sigh. The horse trotted along the road out of the city. Another 200 li past Chengsheng County, and they would be out of Pingzhou. \\\\. After Pingzhou, there was Jingzhou. The sound of horse bells jingled rhythmically. A little girl, dressed in a 3-colored summer outfit, walked ahead. Her clothes had been washed several times, so the colors were no longer as vibrant as they once were, but they now looked softer and more pleasing to the eye. At this moment, she was holding a dried yellow bamo ball, tossing it up and down in the air as she played. Each time she threw the ball high, it would land just a little ahead of her. She would walk forward at a steady pace, catching it perfectly as she reached it. Occasionally, she would miss, needing to pause or take a few extra steps. The lively image of this little girl captured the attention of many passers-by. Meanwhile, the Taoist behind her was preoccupied with thoughts of daily necessities. At the start of spring this year, no, it was already last year, when he left Anking, he had about 27 or 28 taels of silver on him. Whether this was a lot or a little was hard to say. For the average commoner, whose daily life relied mostly on self-sufficiency with few opportunities to earn or spend money, this amount would be considered substantial and could possibly last them several decades. However, for those who did not farm and relied entirely on money to survive, especially in this era of commercial prosperity, it would not last nearly as long. As Song Yu and the Calico cat traveled through the mountains, their expenses were relatively low. But once they entered the cities, although they didn't always stay in the finest inns or the best rooms, it was still not cheap. They rarely skimped on food, and even the hay for the chestnut horse was of good quality, causing their expenses to rise significantly. In the past 6 months, he had spent over 10 taels of silver. Now, only 13 taels of silver and 600 or 700 wen remained. Ahead, he had to travel to Changing, passing through Jingzhou and then Anzhou. Although these places were not as picturesque as Suzhou's landscapes, nor as filled with scenic spots and legends of immortals and demons as Pingzhou, they had their own local customs and traditions. Even if he didn't spend as much time there as in Suzhou or Pingzhou, it would still likely take several months. The cost of living in Yidu was already high, and it was likely even higher in Changing. He would need to save some money, at least enough to avoid sleeping on the streets when he arrived in Changing, and then figure out how to earn more. He also had to set aside money for a good meal, a really good meal. It had been a year and a half since he parted ways in Anking, and he wondered if he would still be able to meet Heroine Wu in Changing. He also wondered how much a good meal would cost there. In any case, he decided to keep this money and save as much as possible. With this plan in mind, there wasn't much left to spend freely. However, Song Yu wasn't worried. He calculated that if he had more, he could live more comfortably. If he had less, he'd live more frugally. As long as he could keep moving forward in the human realm and avoid starvation, he was content. The further he traveled, the thicker the dew and fog became, and the deeper the autumn settled in. Before he knew it, the autumn equinox had passed. The weather was gradually getting colder, and the warmth provided by felt and thin blankets was becoming insufficient. Song Yu used both the thin blanket he had bought and the wool blanket gifted by Prefect Yu, but he still relied on the Calico cat to keep each other warm. In such weather, there was no temptation to linger in bed when sleeping outdoors. As soon as he woke up, he wanted to quickly get up to boil some hot water and eat something warm, then continue on his way. Walking helped keep him warm. Another early morning, the Taoist led the Calico cat and the horse through the village. The houses in the village were scattered, and the surrounding grass and leaves were all golden yellow. Morning fog shrouded the entire world, with the sunlight just beginning to shine from the east, giving everything a particularly warm and cozy feeling. The moon hangs low over the thatched inn. Chickens crow where the night begins. Footsteps echo on the frosted bridge. Awake, but don't think you're first to rise. For others stir before dawn's light. Song Yu paused on a small bridge, with a trail of footprints behind him, his own, hoofprints, and the cat's pawprints. Ahead of him was an old man carrying a bamboo basket on his back, also leaving a trail of footprints. They met on the stone bridge and stopped, acknowledging each other as the Taoist bowed in greeting. The old man leaned on his staff, and so did the Taoist. The Taoist respectfully asked, "Elder, do you know if there's a place nearby where I can have my horse's hooves shod?" The calico cat also lifted its head to look at the old man. "Shoeing a horse." "Yes, we're shoeing a horse." "Shoeing a horse?" The old man's speech was slurred. He had to tilt his head up to look at the Taoist and raised his hand, trying to point, but he wavered for a moment before he finally found the right direction. "There's a village up ahead where there's a blacksmith. I think he might shoe horses." "Is it just ahead?" "It'll take a while to get there." "Do I keep going straight?" "Uh-huh." The old man's directions were vague, and Song Yu wasn't entirely sure. Nevertheless, he respectfully said, "Thank you, elder." The old man shook his head and continued on his way. The Taoist continued on his way, leading the horse and the cat. Their footprints crisscrossed on the yellow dirt road. Song Yu couldn't help but glance back, suddenly noticing that the old man's clothing was even thinner than his own. It was only early morning, yet who knew how far the old man had already traveled? After walking for a while, Song Yu indeed came across a blacksmith's shop. The blacksmith was an elderly man with white hair. He was shirtless while working, his ribs clearly visible due to his thin frame. He was said to be skilled in shoeing horses. The old blacksmith inspected the horse's hooves and said, "Your horse's shoes are nearly worn out." "Yes," Song Yu replied. "Does this horse pull carts more often, or is it mostly ridden?" "You're mistaken, sir. I'm not here to replace the horseshoes. I just need you to remove the nearly worn ones," Song Yu explained. "You don't trust my craftsmanship?" the blacksmith asked. "Not at all." Song Yu quickly cupped his hands in a respectful gesture. "It's just that the horseshoes are no longer needed." "No longer needed? Does the horse not get used much?" "Something like that." The old blacksmith uttered a series of unintelligible sounds, as if still feeling that Song Yu didn't trust his skills, expressing some dissatisfaction. Song Yu was helpless. The horseshoes currently on the Juju-bred horse's hooves were put on during the journey from southern Art County to Mirror Island Lake and Yunding Mountain. That was nearly a year and a half ago. On Yunding Mountain, both he and Lady Calico spent one night to traverse a year. However, the Juju-bred horse had stayed below for the entire year, and yet its hooves hadn't grown at all and hadn't needed any trimming. This was undeniably extraordinary. The ability to prevent hoof growth certainly wasn't just about stopping growth. It also meant that it could potentially grow faster. Song Yu realized that this Juju-bred horse was already quite remarkable and likely no longer needed horseshoes, at least not for the purpose of preventing hoof wear. However, horseshoes served more purposes than just preventing wear. They also protected the hooves from cracking and slipping under heavy loads. The horseshoes for pulling carts differed from those for carrying loads, so Song Yu didn't immediately decide to remove them. As they traveled along small, muddy mountain paths, the Juju-bred horse carried light loads, and the shoes had only recently begun to show significant wear. Thus, he wanted to test if the horse could go without the horseshoes to save some expenses. The old blacksmith worked efficiently, removing one of the horseshoes with just a few strokes and also making some adjustments. The hooves turned out to be much tougher than he expected, making what should have been a pleasing process look somewhat laborious. That was really exhausting. "Thank you for your hard work," Song Yu said. "Where did you get this horse?" "A friend gave it to me." "Aren't you worried it might run away without being reined in?" "Not at all." This was a recurring question that everyone seemed to ask. "Where is it from?" "Yizhou." "Where is Yizhou?" "Head south from here to Pingzhou, then continue south to Shuzhou. Yizhou is west from Shuzhou." "That's quite a distance." "Yes, so we can take it slow." "Where are you heading?" "To see Mount Zhen." Song Yu mentioned this and then asked for directions. "Could you tell me how to get to Mount Zhen from here?" "Which Mount Zhen? The one with many Taoist temples?" "Exactly." "Are you looking for a temple on Mount Zhen?" "Yes." "Are you planning to join one?" "No, I've just heard that Mount Zhen is one of the famous Taoist holy mountains, with numerous temples and many Taoist spiritual masters. Since I'm passing through, I thought I'd visit to see if it's as true as they say." "In that case, you might want to reconsider." "What do you mean?" Song Yu became more interested. The old blacksmith set down the horseshoe, stood up, and took a deep breath. He was clearly exhausted. He then straightened up and said to Song Yu, "On Mount Zhen, there are indeed many Taoist temples, but not many with real skill. Besides, I heard that during the early autumn, heavy rains caused a landslide, and it seems the path hasn't been repaired yet. It's very difficult to traverse the mountain now." Song Yu glanced around at the main road. This was an official road. Although it was a village, it had a blacksmith shop and a few taverns, all relying on this road for their livelihood. News should travel quickly through here. The old blacksmith continued. We locals know that the truly skilled Taoists aren't on Mount Zhen, but on the other side, at Faiyun Temple. When I was young, I was quite interested in these things myself. I saw the old temple owner of Faiyun Temple perform rainmaking and cloud summoning. He truly seemed like a divine immortal. How do I get to Faiyun Temple? You're coming from this side. Yes. And where are you headed finally? Angzhou. Just keep going forward. About 40 li ahead, you'll come to a fork. Turn right to reach Mount Zhen, turn left, and you'll get to Faiyun Temple. You don't need to return, you can keep going straight. Thank you, Songyu hesitated a bit. On one side was the renowned Taoist Holy Mountain, and on the other was a lesser-known small local temple. One was famous far and wide, while the other was known locally. One had a great reputation, and the other had an elder who claimed to have seen celestial powers firsthand. It seemed like an easy choice. After paying for the horseshoe repair and thanking the blacksmith, Song Yu and his horse continued on. Along the way, he asked a few more people for directions. At least 2 people mentioned that although Mount Zhen was famous and known as one of the 4 great Taoist mountains with skilled Taoist spiritual masters cultivating there, the truly remarkable one was still the Faiyun Temple hidden in the wilderness of this mountain. The Taoist masters there were like living divine immortals, not only highly skilled, but also always willing to help others. From morning until afternoon, Song Yu traveled and then turned left at the fork. By mid-afternoon, he stopped to rest by the roadside. At this point, they hadn't seen Faiyun Temple yet. The weather was crisp and clear, with the autumn sun shining brightly, making Song Yu stretch lazily. There was a small hill nearby. Song Yu glanced around and decided to walk up the hill. After taking a few steps, he stopped and turned around, only to see the Calico cat following him with small steps. Seeing him stop, the Calico cat had already taken a few more steps ahead before stopping as well. She lifted her head to look at him, and the two, one human and one cat, stared at each other in confusion. Why aren't you moving? Don't follow me, Lady Calico. Where are you going? Just don't follow. What are you going to do? Lady Calico, you should head back and watch the horse. Upon hearing about the horse, the Calico cat finally turned around. Seeing the horse standing alone by the roadside and looking quite lonely, the cat hesitated for a moment before walking back. Song Yu then continued up the small hill on his own. Looking back, he saw the cat dutifully staying by the horse. It did not follow him, though it stood upright, stretching its neck to keep an eye on him. Song Yu decided to walk a bit further to a spot where the cat couldn't see him. Otherwise, it would certainly follow. There was a waterfall that cascaded down 3,000 kai. Just as the sound of the water ceased, a shout came from behind. Where did this cat demon come from? Song Yu walked back up to the top of the slope and saw that, at some point, a middle-aged Taoist had appeared on the road below and was frowning as he stared at Lady Calico. The cat was sneaking up the small hill, intending to spy on what the Taoist was doing. Seeing another unfamiliar Taoist arrive, it had no intention of fighting or explaining itself. Without a second thought, it quickly sped up and tried to run up the hill. Don't go, the Taoist, noticing the cat's furtive and guilty behavior as well as its intention to flee, was not willing to let it escape easily. He waved his sleeve, sending a gentle breeze that stirred up the dust. However, before the dust had settled, a voice called out, "Taoist master, please wait." Song Yu walked at a steady pace, blowing out a breath to disperse the dust. He then took a few steps down the small hill. The Calico cat, unaffected by the dust, continued running toward him, but stopped halfway. It then turned to look at the middle-aged Taoist with a mix of curiosity and caution, and seemed uncertain about what the Taoist was doing. The middle-aged Taoist turned his gaze toward Song Yu, then glanced at the cat, narrowing his eyes with a look of confusion and a hint of awkwardness. As Song Yu approached him, he cupped his hands in a respectful gesture and asked, "Taoist, why are you making things difficult for my cat?" "Fellow Taoist, you're the one who brought this cat demon," the Taoist inquired. "That's right." "Ah, I see. Then it's a misunderstanding." The Taoist also cupped his hands in return. "I was wondering why the horse was left alone by the roadside without the supervision of a human, with only a sneaky little demon around. It was being stealthy, and it refused to answer my question. I thought it might be up to some mischief, hence the suspicion." In this world, no cat could suppress its desire to guard a person using the toilet. Even if the person tried to prevent them from watching, the cat would still sneak a look. Such misunderstandings, from a different perspective, were quite amusing. "I am Song Yu, a mountaineer from Yizhu in Linquan County. It is an honor to meet you, Taoist." "Meow meow." "I am Taoist Bashan. Nice to meet you, fellow Taoist. Taoist Beishan glanced at the cat beside Song Yu and added, why don't you put a mark on the little cat demon you're raising, fellow Taoist? If something goes wrong, the misunderstanding could be quite serious. She is my companion. Taoist Beishan squinted again. May I ask which temple you cultivate at? At Hidden Dragon Temple on Yinyang Mountain. No wonder. How did you know? Although the halting wind technique I used is something I applied casually, there are few Taoists in the world who can break it with a single breath. Additionally, considering that you're from Yizhu, Linquan County, and you don't address yourself as poor Taoist, it's easy to associate you with the renowned Hidden Dragon Temple, said Taoist Beishan. Has this generation's heir emerged? May I ask if you cultivate at Fayan Temple? How did you know? On the way here, an old man mentioned that Fayan Temple has true masters who excel in subduing demons and solving problems, with profound Taoist skills comparable to immortals. I came specifically to visit. Then, we're truly fated to meet. Indeed. This way, please. Walking a short distance further, Songyu realized that they were actually very close to Fayan Temple. Fayan Temple was a traditional Taoist temple, differing from Hidden Dragon Temple. They were more willing to exorcise demons and ward off evil spirits. Demons and spirits were not supposed to easily tread the paths to the human realm, let alone make their way to someone's doorstep. Given that the cat appeared to be sneaking around with suspicious intentions, it was no wonder that the first thing the Taoist did was question it and refuse to let it leave easily, though the poor cat was frightened. The three of them, a person, a cat, and a horse, proceeded toward the temple. Fayan Temple was situated on a small hill, surrounded by lush greenery. Upon reaching the base of the mountain, there was a long stone staircase leading directly to the temple's main entrance. The entire temple was structured so that each courtyard was at a higher level than the previous one. Looking up, it gave a sense of elegance, as if observing a mountain. Taoist Song, please come in. May I ask where you plan to go after leaving, Taoist Master? I was planning to go to Pingzhu. To Pingzhu? Yes. That's quite far. Songyu was a bit surprised. He had taken nearly 2 months to travel from Pingzhu, moving slowly. Meanwhile, this Taoist seemed to be just taking a short tour nearby, but was actually intending to go to Pingzhu. Haha, our temple differs from Hidden Dragon Temple. I'm quite familiar with the Taoist temples along the way from here to Pingzhu. Even if I'm not well acquainted with them, they must have heard of the reputation of Fayan Temple. I only need to reach a temple each day to rest, and I'll naturally have food and lodging. Taoist Beishan tilted his head up and laughed heartily. Then he continued. A few days ago, this poor Taoist heard someone mention that another person from Pingzhu encountered an immortal on Yunding Mountain in Pingzhu. This time, it seems different from before, so I wanted to see for myself whether it was truly an immortal or some demon disguised as one, causing trouble and delaying the people's time. Taoist, where are you coming from? From Pingzhu. We were truly destined to meet. Taoist Beishan approached the temple and waved his hand. With a thunderous sound, the mountain gate swung open. Songyu stopped to look. Above the gate was a plaque without any writing. On either side were couplets that wrote, "The world within the pot draws near the blue sky. In the cave, the mist and clouds have a leisurely day." As they stepped over the threshold, they realized that the floor inside was paved with blue stone, and fallen leaves were left undisturbed. The Taoist walked slowly, and the surroundings exuded a sense of tranquility and elegance. In the center stood an ancient tree, a highlight of the scene. However, its pavilion, which was supposed to shelter the entire outer courtyard, now seemed lifeless due to neglect, leaving only its withered, yellowed branches against the sky. It was truly a poignant sight. Chapter 102. Lady Calico has her own skills. Taoist Beishan was the temple owner of the Fayan Temple. This Taoist truly possessed impressive abilities. Although Hidden Dragon Temple might not be well known among the common people, masters like him would have certainly heard of it. Their chance encounter in the wilderness was indeed serendipitous, so Taoist Beishan invited them to stay at the temple. They were provided with a simple and unadorned room. The disciples helped move their belongings in. After sitting in the room for a while, Songyu thought that what Taoist Beishan had said made sense. Lady Calico was, after all, a demon. Taoists skilled in exorcism naturally had the ability to recognize demonic beings. While it was manageable as long as Lady Calico was by his side, once she was separated from him and encountered a Taoist with real cultivation skills, she would likely face some difficulties or even be frightened. However, there were not many Taoists with cultivation skills in the world. Along the way, he had encountered very few, so this issue hadn't been a major concern for him. Next, he was planning to head to Changing. Changing was known as the most virtuous city in the world. It was possible that Taoist masters preferred a serene environment and might not congregate there, but Buddhist masters were drawn to lively places. In the past years, they were even interested in participating in politics. Many court officials were friendly with senior Buddhist monks, and some high-ranking court ministers even had monks as their advisors. It wasn't until the last 20 years, when a Taoist became the state preceptor, that this situation improved somewhat. In addition to Buddhist and Taoist masters, there were also folk experts, as well as various supernatural beings and demons mingling among them. Indeed, while Lady Calico was a companion, it was absolutely not appropriate to mark her like other Taoists marking their spiritual beasts or divine immortals marking their mounts. He needed to think of another solution. Song Yu rummaged through his bag for a while and found a small wooden plaque from the bundle he brought down the mountain. The plaque was exquisitely crafted, resembling a worldly token. Both sides were adorned with cloud patterns. The front side had the words Hidden Dragon Temple in large characters, while the back side had smaller text, including Song Yu's name and the generation number. Song Yu examined it closely, holding onto one corner. Snap! He easily pinched off a small corner, about the size of a fingernail. Then he began to polish and shape it. Lady Calico climbed over to him, moving very slowly. Once she reached his side, she looked up at his face, then down at the small piece of wood as she got very close. What are you doing? Making a tag. A tag for what? Look, Song Yu picked up the original wooden plaque from Hidden Dragon Temple and showed it to her. I have a plaque with my name on it. This way, others will know who I am and where I come from. I think you should have a similar tag, but smaller. Is it for me? Yes, Song Yu explained. It can be worn as a necklace around your neck. If you don't like it or think it looks unattractive, you can also keep it with you in your human form. So others will know I'm your cat. Not exactly. Song Yu continued polishing and said without much thought, this way, others will see that you're with me and not a bad demon, so they won't cause trouble for you. Is it because I'm weak? Lady Calico, you have your own skills. What skills? You have many. Song Yu continued his work, polishing the tag and speaking as if he hadn't really thought his words through. For example, the rabbit we ate yesterday noon, you caught it from the mountain. The bird eggs we ate on the road before were also collected by you. Without you, I wouldn't have those eggs and rabbits. These are skills I don't have. Taoist priest. Am I embarrassing you? Why would you? Song Yu immediately stopped his work and turned to look at her. He didn't understand why she asked that. Lady Calico looked up at him with a serious expression. I get scared by the thunder god and other Taoist priests. If I were really powerful, I wouldn't be afraid like this. It's normal for demons to be scared of the thunder god and Taoist priests. Most demons fear the thunder god and Taoist priests. Even many very powerful demons are afraid of the thunder god. Song Yu paused. He continued, but Lady Calico, you're naturally intelligent and diligent. You easily gained enlightenment and naturally transformed. Even though you once strayed into the divine Tao, you managed to make your temple prosperous with incense offerings. With your talent and skills, you'll likely become a great demon soon. At that time, I might even need to rely on you for protection. Lady Calico was silent for a moment, standing next to him with her front paws resting on his leg. Her head was held high as she was looking into his eyes. After a long while, she finally looked away, then suddenly twisted her body and jumped down to play with her bamo ball. Song Yu shook his head, who knew what a cat was thinking. He continued to polish. A voice came from nearby. I want it to be like yours with a string. I want to wear it around my neck. A test of his craftsmanship had begun. \\\\*. Under the bright moon and green mountains at night, with the high sky and crisp autumn dew, the Taoist temple was serene, though it was now filled with many more footsteps. One set of footsteps reached Song Yu's door. Knock, knock. Taoist master, the temple owner invites you to dinner. I'm coming right away. Song Yu opened the door and went out with the cat. Taoist Beishan had arranged a feast here to treat them. Young Taoists in their Taoist robes carried dishes back and forth, bringing one after another into the dining hall. Fayan Temple, being a Taoist temple of its kind, naturally did not have to pay taxes. Its local reputation was substantial, so its income was undoubtedly considerable. To some extent, it was similar to the Hidden Dragon Temple in Linquin County. But while the Hidden Dragon Temple was sometimes open and sometimes closed, and did not welcome many pilgrims which affected its incense revenue, the Fayan Temple was likely wealthier. For hosting esteemed guests today, the meal was not overly extravagant, yet it was certainly not lacking. As Song Yu entered, the hosts and guests took their seats. Taoist Beishan, as the temple owner, sat at the head of the table with rows of seats on either side. Song Yu and Lady Calico sat at the very front. The table had 5 or 6 unusual dishes, a lotus seed pod, and a pot of wine. Taoist Beishan first toasted Lady Calico, apologized for the misunderstanding, and then invited everyone to start eating. Song Yu glanced down at the table. One dish was roasted lamb. Another was cured meat, sliced thin and gleaming. There was also a dish that seemed to be fried vegetables, served on lotus leaves. It included deep green, seaweed-like thin slices, some lotus root cut into small finger-thick pieces that appeared raw, a whole raw fish, and a plate of vegetables stir-fried in a way that made it hard to distinguish. Finally, there was the whole lotus seed pod. Song Yu looked for a while before starting to eat. Noting that the fish was only on his table, he deduced it was specially prepared for Lady Calico and served it to her first. Then, he sampled the dishes one by one. Taoist Beishan, sitting at the head of the table, noticed his expressions and actions and cheerfully explained. This is fried in lotus leaves, using the most tender leaves, coated in flour and then deep-fried. As Song Yu ate, he could no longer distinguish the specific ingredients, just the taste of fried food. It was indeed unusual. In these times, deep-fried food was rare. They were not something you'd find unless it was a festival, a special occasion, or in affluent households, as it was too costly to use so much oil. He then tried the seaweed-like thin slices. Taoist Beishan explained, "This is moss, dried and baked into thin, crisp slices. It makes for a nice snack to enjoy in idle moments." He recognized the lotus root, though it was from an immature lotus. It was at its most tender and crispy at this stage, sweet and pleasant. The dish with vegetables was actually stir-fried with lotus leaf tips, those that had just emerged from the water and hadn't fully opened yet. The leaves were layered and wrapped, creating a distinct, layered texture that was quite intriguing. Although we have plenty of food and drink here, sourcing ingredients can be inconvenient. In such a hurry, we had to use mountain specialties. I hope you won't mind, said Taoist Beishan. You're too generous, Taoist master. Song Yu quickly set down his chopsticks and cupped his hands in gratitude. But it's already deep autumn. Where did the lotus leaves and seed pods come from? Before Taoist Beishan could respond, a young Taoist beside Song Yu chuckled and said, Taoist master, you may not know, but there is a spiritual spring on the mountain behind my home. It's a spring that flows through all seasons. The pool formed by the collection of water is called the Four Seasons Pool. The water from it, called four-season fluid, can nurture plants from any time of the year. Before the young Taoist could finish his sentence, Taoist Beishan furrowed his brow. The young Taoist quickly fell silent. Taoist Beishan then smiled at Song Yu and said, My disciple loves to boast. Don't mind his exaggerations. The spring on the mountain has a bit of spiritual qi, but the water is not hot enough for baths or cooking eggs. It just keeps the pool water from getting too cold, and with the spiritual qi, the lotus root can naturally grow in all seasons. I see, Song Yu nodded, smiling. If what the young Taoist said was true, that the water could support plants year-round, it would indeed be quite extraordinary. It made sense that Taoist Beishan might not want to reveal such a secret. If Taoist Beishan's explanation was accurate, it was much more ordinary. Taoist Beishan then suggested, eating in silence can be quite dull. How about inviting the fairies from the painting to perform a song and dance to liven things up? He clapped his hands and turned to look at Song Yu. Turning to look behind them, Song Yu and Lady Calico saw a large painting on the wall. It depicted a lavish palace with delicate curtains, but no one was dining. Instead, a group of elegant and beautiful women were dancing in the grand hall, some playing instruments and others performing graceful dances. Suddenly, the figures in the painting seemed to come to life. Figures began to fly out from the painting. When they first emerged, the figures were small, but as they flew forward by an inch, they grew larger by a bit. By the time they landed in the middle of the dining hall, they were as real as any living person. Unbeknownst to them, several chairs had appeared in the middle of the room, and the women holding instruments had taken their seats just in time. A pipa was strummed, and its sound was like the tinkling of spring water. The zio and flute immediately followed suit, playing in harmony. There was no delay. The hall was instantly filled with the sound of music, as if they had been performing from the very beginning without interruption. The melody was enchanting, like celestial music. They fully experienced the charm of traditional music. In the middle of the room, a woman dressed in red and blue garments with fluttering sleeves danced gracefully. However, she was not on the ground. She seemed like a real fairy. She was light as a feather and was floating in the air most of the time. She touched the ground lightly on her toes occasionally, only to rise again, her movements ethereal. She stretched her elegant figure, her clothes appearing weightless as they floated in the air. At times, she would flick her sleeves, which would sweep past Song Yu. Occasionally, she would tap the ground lightly, mimicking the grace of flying to the moon. She gently rose to midair, hovering for a moment and then descending slowly. It was the Facian dance. Though her attire was minimal, it was not revealing. There was no hint of sensuality, only the otherworldly grace of her dance and the exquisite beauty of the woman. This kind of magic was essentially an illusion. Common in classic literature, it involved summoning moon palace fairies to enchant mortals, making them impressed with the power of the one who casted the spell to summon fairies. Such spells were indeed powerful, requiring years of cultivation and leisure time to master. Xianxia, following the example of the other Taoists, took a lotus seed pod and removed the seeds before enjoying the dance and eating the sweet, refreshing lotus seeds. He also glanced at the other Taoists. Although they faked a look of excitement, their expressions showed little awe. It seemed that Taoist Beishan's performance was something they had seen many times before, and perhaps every performance was similar. As the fairies in the painting completed their performance, they all returned to the artwork. Taoist Beishan then called his disciples to perform. These disciples were of various ages, some even appearing older than Taoist Beishan himself. Each had their own skills and could be considered masters in their own right. Some people, who knew a few purely ornamental or aesthetically pleasing spells, were called upon by Taoist Beishan to entertain the guests. The disciples did not dare refuse. One blew a breath, creating a field of flowers in the mist. Another performed a gesture, causing a dragon to emerge from a wine cup. One more cast a spell to extinguish the oil lamp, projecting a starry sky onto the ceiling. These were minor spells, some of which were recorded in the texts of Hidden Dragon Temple, while others were not. Xianxia didn't concern himself with whether the Taoists were willing to perform or not. He enjoyed watching the performance while eating. After the meal, the disciples dispersed and the food was cleared, leaving only the lotus seed pods and wine. The oil lamp continued to burn, leaving Xianxia, Taoist Beishan, and Lady Calico as the only occupants in the dining hall. The dim, yellowish oil lamp swayed, casting a flickering light in the room. Taoist Beishan moved from the main seat to sit beside Xianxia, engaging him in casual conversation. Lady Calico sat attentively beside them, her eyes reflecting the candlelight, sparkling brightly. I offer a toast to you, fellow Taoist Song. Thank you. Xianxia also raised his cup, taking a small sip since he did not particularly enjoy drinking. Taoist Song, when did you descend the mountain to travel? About 2 years ago. Since your descent, have you encountered many interesting events and seen many scenic spots? Do share. Perhaps I have traveled the same paths and can compare the old scenery with the present. Xianxia smiled. Speaking of the interesting things he had encountered since coming down the mountain, there were too many to count. He was destined to remember the countless landscapes and people for a lifetime, and it was difficult to recount them all at once. However, there was one thing he had been wanting to discuss, but had found no one to talk to. Taoist Beishan was not an ordinary person. He was well-traveled, knowledgeable, and powerful, having lived in seclusion here for many years. With the meal and wine, it was the perfect opportunity to engage in conversation. So Xianxia considered for a moment, then turned to look at Taoist Beishan under the dim light of the oil lamp. He peeled a lotus seed as he spoke. On my journey, I often hear people speak of the underworld and reincarnation. These ideas and beliefs seem deeply ingrained in the humans' hearts, but I wonder when they began. Taoist Beishan's expression shifted immediately, his gaze became serious, and his brows furrowed slightly. With his level of cultivation skills, Taoist Beishan naturally understood the implications. Prescription. The reason why there were gods in the world, and why gods were considered divine, was because people believed in them. For instance, Duke of Thunder Zhou was originally just the chief constable of Changing and a mere mortal with a fleshly body in his previous life. Otherwise, how could he have possibly been surrounded and killed by schemers? Yet now, he resided in the heavens as the Thunder God, wielding the power of divine retribution. Demons and evil beings everywhere feared him, but where did this divine position and power come from? How did the heavenly palace come to be? How did the great Emperor Qijin arise? And now, everyone was beginning to believe in the underworld and reincarnation. Taoist Beishan did not answer immediately, but instead asked casually, Fellow Taoist, since you have only been down the mountain for 2 years, you haven't traveled through many prefectures, have you? This is only the 4th prefecture. Oh, Taoist Beishan thought for a moment, and then understood his route. You haven't been to Changing yet, nor the northern or eastern regions. I am planning to go to Changing. That's good, that's good. Taoist Beishan, clearly having been to Changing himself, smiled and said, I wonder what expression the state preceptor would have if he knew that the current heir of Hidden Dragon Temple had come to Changing. Have you been to Changing? Yes. Have you met the state preceptor? I have. Taoist Bashan took another sip from his cup, smiling as he said, the state preceptor hails from Mount Lumming, as you may know. I see. Song Yu had already heard about the state preceptor's achievements and abilities and had suspected that he was the heir of Mount Lumming. Now it was confirmed. Mount Lumming, like Qingcheng Mountain and Mount Zhen, was one of the great Taoist mountains. It was said that Mount Lumming hosted the renowned Fengshan Temple. Although the Taoist masters there did not have the abilities to exorcise demons, make clouds, or summon rain, they were well versed in scriptures, history, and divination. They were highly knowledgeable and skilled in predicting fate and the future, possessing a range of esoteric skills. Their expertise was comparable to that of the legendary Grandmaster Tianxuan back then. They were naturally suited to be advisors and strategists. Over the past 3 dynasties, high-ranking officials, princes, and even emperors have favored consulting the Taoist masters from Mount Lumming, often appointing them as advisors. However, there was only one who held the title of state preceptor, as the position was rarely established in the court. This reflected his exceptional abilities. Taoist Bashan continued. The state preceptor, skilled in manipulating power and human nature, as well as in devising strategies, has been a great help to the country with his sound policies that benefited both the people and the country. His contributions were notable during the northern region's victories and the nation's impressive achievements, though these victories came at a high cost, causing great suffering and hardship for the common people. The current state of the northern regions remains chaotic, and the merits and demerits are beyond my assessment, and even future generations may not fully explain them either. Song Yu asked, could the spreading of the idea of the underworld and reincarnation be the state preceptor's doing? To Taoist Song, Taoist Bashan smiled and raised his cup, nodding. The idea of the underworld and reincarnation has long been in the making, and its development is related to many factors. At that time, the state preceptor likely had not yet been born. It's a naturally evolving concept, but its current widespread acceptance does indeed bear the state preceptor's influence. How do you know this, fellow Taoist? He. Taoist Bashan did not elaborate further. Since it was merely a casual conversation, Song Yu did not press for more details. Instead, he inquired, does the state preceptor intend to create the underworld and reincarnation? He's merely fostering and facilitating its development. Impressive. Indeed, the world was full of remarkable individuals, and history was truly fascinating. Song Yu couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. Oh, there was the heavenly palace above. It is essentially a construction of deities bound by heavenly laws and duties. The heavenly palace itself had little other power. However, if the underworld were merely a simple construct of netherworld deities akin to the heavenly palace, it would be easy enough. But involving reincarnation, that was a matter of the heavens. Was it something that could be achieved merely through the will of living beings? In discussing this with Taoist Bashan himself was unsure. I do not concern myself with how the state preceptor or the court manipulate matters or seek divine positions and benefits, Taoist Bashan said. My worry is that if the underworld and reincarnation really take shape, and if the heavens grow closer to your hidden dragon temple, I wonder how your temple would fare. After we cultivators die, do we still have to depend on others' favors? What does the heavenly palace think of such worldly matters? I do not concern myself with such trifles. Indeed. Most Taoists were indeed in pursuit of a carefree existence. Song Yu smiled and brought a lotus seed to Lady Calico's mouth, but Lady Calico only sniffed at it and turned its head away. He had to eat it himself. They continued discussing the chaos in the north, the city of Changing, the legendary land of phoenixes and dragons, and the heavenly palace. Occasionally, Taoists would pass by outside. They would catch snippets of the conversation, and alarmed would not dare to listen further. As the night grew late, the two stood up and exchanged farewells. Taoist Bashan said to him, why not stay a few more days with this poor Taoist? Thank you for your kindness. It has been a pleasure conversing with you, Song Yu replied. However, there are still worldly affairs and scenic spots waiting for me. I shouldn't stay too long. I will leave tomorrow. Then I won't keep you here any longer. Thank you for your hospitality. I'll go to rest now. I won't disturb you any longer. May you have a good night's sleep. If you need anything, just tell my disciples. All right. Song Yu then took Lady Calico back to their room. After washing up and lying on the bed, Song Yu was still lost in thought. It was common for Taoists traveling the world to stay in Taoist temples, and it was not unusual to chat with kindred spirits for an evening. It was a kind of refined pleasure. However, for a fake Taoist who had visited few temples in his journey like Song Yu, this kind of interaction was rare. He was also wary of discussing Taoist doctrines he didn't understand, so it was rare for him to initiate conversations with other Taoists at Taoist temples. Taoist Beishan was well-informed, and conversing with him was indeed interesting. Such discussions were naturally just casual talk, sharing opinions and serving as reference. The specifics still required personal exploration, but it was nonetheless informative. However, he had indeed startled Lady Calico, so Song Yu decided not to linger. He then slept soundly through the night. The next morning, after having breakfast, Song Yu packed his belongings. Leading his horse into the courtyard, he couldn't help but stop and gaze at the withered tree before him with a look of regret. He said to Taoist Beishan, who was seeing him off, "Since the spring water behind the mountain has such spiritual qi that allows summer lotuses to bloom continuously in winter, it is evident that it has boundless vitality. Why not use it to save this withered tree?" "You may not know," Taoist Beishan replied. "This tree is already beyond recovery. The spiritual qi of the spring water dissipates quickly once it leaves the pool. It cannot save the tree." "I see," Song Yu pondered for a moment, then raised his hand, releasing a few strands of spiritual qi. "I am deeply grateful for your hospitality. As a token of my appreciation, I will revive the old tree in your courtyard. It will add a touch of elegance to your Faiyun temple." With a wave of his hand, the spiritual qi flew toward the ancient tree. Ordinary people could not see the changes in the tree, but Taoists could sense that the vitality within it had been revived. "Fellow Taoist, your gesture is much appreciated. Thank you." "I should be the one thanking you, fellow Taoist." Taoist Beishan escorted him to the temple gate. "Oh, by the way, I got so caught up in our conversation last night that I completely forgot about the nearby Yunding Mountain in Pingzhu." Taoist Beishan suddenly remembered and asked Song Yu at the gate, "Since you came from Pingzhu, have you been to Yunding Mountain?" "Of course I have," Song Yu could not avoid answering. Taoist Beishan then asked, "Were you also there seeking immortals?" "Exactly." "Haha, I thought that the Taoists of Hidden Dragon Temple on Yinyang Mountain were like immortals, but I didn't expect that even the immortals of Hidden Dragon Temple would be seeking immortals." Taoist Beishan laughed. "Did you find what you were looking for?" "I saw ancient inscriptions on the mountain and glimpsed the figure of an ancient person in the spiritual resonance of the great mountain. I know he lives hidden in the mountains and possesses a noble character, so I feel that the journey was worthwhile," Song Yu answered truthfully. "Then it's not the immortal encountered by County Magistrate Cui in recent rumors." "Naturally not. You must have heard about the rumors of County Magistrate Cui meeting an immortal. Haven't you thought of going back to Yunding Mountain to search again, to get to the bottom of it?" "No." "Oh, why is that?" Taoist Beishan was puzzled and didn't understand. "It's hard to explain." "It's hard to explain." Taoist Beishan frowned and fell into thought. Taoist Beishan said, glancing at Song Yu, "I originally planned to visit Yunding Mountain to search for the immortal encountered by County Magistrate Cui. Whether it was a true immortal or some demonic force deceiving and killing mortals, I wanted to check it out. However, by the time the news reached me, it had been quite a while. I wondered if I could still find it. Just as I was about to leave, I met you. Since you've come down from Yunding Mountain, do you think I could still find that immortal?" "Probably not," Song Yu said honestly. "But Yunding Mountain is indeed beautiful with its ancient inscriptions. It would be worthwhile to visit." "I see," Taoist Beishan nodded and smiled. Oh, safe travels, fellow Taoist." "Farewell." Song Yu took a step and exited the temple. Looking back, Song Yu noticed that a sign had appeared above the gate with the words, "Faiyun Temple," inscribed on it unbeknownst to him. The door couplets on either side had also been changed to, "Heart like drifting clouds, always free. Intent like flowing water, moving east and west." It seemed this was the usual appearance of the temple's gate, while what he saw yesterday was its former look. Faiyun Temple must be an ancient legacy. In ancient times, the mortal Tao was prosperous, and attaining eternal life was relatively easy, leading to many powerful cultivators. However, as time progressed and the heavenly Tao evolved, immortality of the mortal Tao became rare, and divine Tao rose in prominence. This resulted in fewer powerful cultivators and legacies in the world. Hidden Dragon Temple was an exception, containing many mysterious secrets. "Let's go." With that, Song Yu, accompanied by the cat and the horse, descended the mountain gate without looking back. The cat now had a small red cord around its neck with a wooden pendant, which made it appear a bit more charming. The large gate of the temple slowly closed behind them, as a Taoist behind the gate clicked his tongue in amazement. \\\\\. They passed through Jingzhu and Angzhu. They would set off at dawn and rested only at dusk. With streams and mountains as companions, and clouds and moon as company, they journeyed from late autumn into winter. The winters of Jingzhou and Anzhu were colder than Yizhou and Shuzhou. Eventually, it became impossible to camp out in the wilderness. They had to stay in shabby inns or stables to seek shelter from the wind, where the conditions were often quite rough. From winter, they journeyed until early spring. They took breaks along the way, continuing their journey toward Changing. In the 4th year of Ming, at the end of the 1st month, Donk County was less than 100 li from Changing City, but spring rain had been falling continuously for 3 days. Songyu had also stayed here for 3 days. Since descending the mountain, Songyu's favorite pastime in the cities had been listening to storytelling. Next to the inn was a tea house where storytellers performed. Listening to stories was a good deal. One could hear many things, true or false. For just a few wen, one could spend half the day there, chatting with the storyteller in between. This was particularly suited for Songyu, whose funds were running low. The storyteller on the stage was narrating. In the world of martial arts, the 3 greatest sects with the highest skills and the most fame are, first and foremost, the Yun sect from Changing. In Yizhou, with its myriad martial sects, the Zishan sect stands out as a leader. The sect is renowned for its sword and blade techniques, and is also recognized as one of the 3 great sects. In the northern regions, plagued by constant strife, the Xianxia sect remains steadfast with countless disciples and is considered another of the great sects. The tea house was relatively elegant, built by the river. Songyu had taken a seat by the window, sipping tea and listening to the stories while gazing outside. The rain was light and finer than hair, yet dense, creating a sand-blasted effect on the originally mirror-like river surface. The storyteller's voice drifted in as he drank a cup of tea, and that was how he spent an entire afternoon. About an hour later, the storyteller had finished and was collecting tips from the audience. Someone asked, "Sir, you are well-traveled and knowledgeable. Do you know of any places for leisure and entertainment in Changing?" The storyteller looked up, and so did Songyu. They saw a group of scholars who appeared to be new arrivals in Changing, stranded in Donk County due to the rain. These scholars had been generous with their tips earlier, so the storyteller did not dare to be negligent and replied, "Well, it depends on what kind of entertainment you are looking for. It seems you're indeed very knowledgeable. I make a living from this." The storyteller politely cupped his hand with his fan. "Then we shall seek your advice." "Not at all. Just last year when I was in Changing, I heard there are 10 wonders of the city." "Which 10 wonders?" Amidst the bustling crowd in the tea house, many continued to leave, but some stopped to hear more and expand their knowledge. Songyu remained seated, not moving. There was still a sip left in his teacup. The storyteller, with a fan in hand, continued with a storytelling flair even in casual conversation. "As for the 10 wonders of Changing, the feast at Yunchun restaurant is one of them. It is commonly said that these dishes originated from the palace, but that's mostly a misconception. If they were truly palace recipes, the noble ladies and princesses would not need to order from Yunchun restaurant. So if noble ladies and princesses order from there, it must be quite expensive, right?" "That depends on what you eat." "Oh, I haven't personally dined there, but I've heard that a basic meal at Yunchun restaurant costs at least 2 or 3 taels of silver. For a better meal, you need to make a reservation in advance, and it would cost at least a dozen taels. If you want to eat like the palace nobles and princesses, I wouldn't know the cost." "Is it really that expensive?" "It's true, they can procure anything rare, birds from the sky, fish from the water, and creatures from the land. Whether it's worth it depends on each person. I certainly can't afford it, it's all hearsay for me." "And what else?" The storyteller continued. "The porcelain from Jingyao is another wonder, as well as the evening performances by Miss Wanjiang in Changing is another. There's also the apricot blossoms on Mount Chang outside the city, the bustling of the east and west markets, and the night market is another. Additionally, there's the midnight ghost market, the efficacy of the incense at Tianhai Temple, the girls at Qingheng Courtyard in the south and Lihua Garden in the north, as well as the tea at Annal Pavilion. Finally, the housing prices in Changing is another wonder." The scholar replied, "That sounds repetitive." "Sir, you might not be aware." Song Yu left the tea house and walked back with an umbrella. He remembered these 10 wonders well, especially the last one. During his time cultivating on Yinyang Mountain, he had never imagined a day when he would be troubled by housing prices. As Song Yu was about to reach the inn, he saw a calico cat walking from the opposite side. The cat, naturally, wasn't carrying an umbrella and was strolling in the rain with its fur soaked through. It seemed completely unfazed, looking left and right, occasionally glancing up at the sky as if observing the raindrops. Suddenly, an umbrella appeared, shielding the cat from the rain. Looking up, the cat saw that it was a Taoist priest. Upon closer inspection, it was its own Taoist companion. "Him." The person and the cat walked into the inn together. Back in the room, Songyu took out a cloth and wrapped the cat in it, carefully wiping her down. Her head bobbed up and down as her fur fluffed up, almost making her unrecognizable from before. The Taoist's voice was gentle as he asked, "Where did you go, Lady Calico?" "Just out for a stroll." "Why go out in the rain?" "You went out too." "I borrowed an umbrella from the shopkeeper." "It's just rain." The soft and casual tone was a familiar one. Since he'd known the cat, Songyu often heard such expressions. He didn't know what the cat thought, but he often felt a sense of ease from her words, which frequently moved him. Today was no different. However, today he also thought of that heroine. 100 li away was Changing City. Nearly 2 years had passed in a blur. He still remembered the promise made back then, but he wondered if she was still in Changing. Songyu's wiping slowed as the Calico cat, ever perceptive, curiously peered at him. "Taoist priest." "Huh? What are you thinking about?" "I think the rain might stop by tomorrow morning." "How do you know?" "Just a guess." "And you say you can't tell fortunes." Songyu shook his head inwardly and continued wiping. \\\\. The next morning, the rain had indeed stopped. The Taoist, along with the horse and cat, set off again. Today happened to be the first day of February. As they traveled along the road, they soon reached the west gate. They journeyed from dawn until dusk, and as they climbed a small hill, Changing City appeared before them. It was an immensely tall city wall. Even though they had descended from the small hill, there was still some distance to the wall, which seemed to stretch endlessly in both directions. The rain had ceased, but the twilight was exceptionally dense. Everything in the distance, including Changing City, was shrouded in heavy twilight and appeared dreamlike. Songyu paused to gaze at it, silent. Although Changing was just a waypoint on his journey, and not his final destination, the 2-year trek from Yidu had been significant. In these 2 years, he had indeed traversed countless mountains and rivers. He had once driven away water demons at Lingbo, witnessed the great Liujiang gathering in Anqing with countless heroes of the jianghu battling, conversed with a millennium-old fairy, and encountered a peerless swordsman who slayed ghosts. He even wandered through a marketplace of demons and ghosts in the mountains, drank with the mountain god in the wilderness, sought immortals on Yunding Mountain, and moored at Mirror Island Lake under the starry sky, with reflections of starlight on the water and fishing lights hovering just above the horizon. He experienced countless sunrises and sunsets, countless landscapes and human connections. The journey of the tens of thousands of li he traversed all merged into a single painting in his eyes. A person's life was composed of all the paths they had walked, all the scenery they had seen, every person they had met, every word they had spoken, every piece of writing they had read, and every small choice they had made. Of course, Songyu also remembered his gratitude for a jianghu woman's earnestness in friendship, and the agreement made to meet in Changing. And now he had finally arrived in the world's most prosperous city, the center of the era, and a dream for countless people. The time had come to fulfill the promise. From afar, he saw the city shrouded in mist. The broad city wall, while clearly visible up close with people coming and going, became indistinct in the distance. Would the heroine be outside the city? Songyu was unsure. Thinking about it again carefully, heroine Wu had been heading straight to Changing back then, which wasn't far from Shuzhou if she didn't take a detour. Even if she traveled slowly or was delayed, she should have arrived by the spring of the 2nd year of Ming, at the latest by early summer. If not then, at least by late summer. Now, a year and a half had passed since the late summer of the 2nd year of Ming. Songyu was uncertain whether the heroine was still in Changing, whether she was well, or whether her words at the time had been a mere whim and spoken impulsively in a moment of excitement. She might have come to Changing, found it uninteresting after a few visits or months, then decided it was meaningless and thus gave up. Or perhaps the wait had been too long, over a year, and she might have thought that he would not come. Or perhaps she decided that he had not sought her out even if he had come to Changing, and thus she stopped waiting. Or maybe the cold in Changing during this early spring was too harsh, and she simply did not want to venture out anymore. He could not say that he longed dearly to see her. When the two first met, their acquaintance was brief and limited, so their bond was not particularly deep. But Songyu was very curious to know if there were truly people in the jianghu of this era who would wait for over 20 months and come to the West Gate every day for a month, and then every first day of the month, simply to preserve a friendship and a rare bond. Such dedication itself was something precious. Songyu stood for a long time before finally taking a step forward. He walked down, and he walked on. Peach blossoms dotted the path as the city wall grew closer and larger. At the city gate, people bustled about, and carts and horses moved in a continuous flow. The grand capital of Great Yan was gradually revealing its majestic and prosperous side. Next to the city gate was a notice board, similar to those outside Yidu, featuring announcements, wanted posters, and reward notices, among others. Many people gathered around to read them. Among them was a figure heavily wrapped up in gray-black winter clothing with frizzy, disheveled hair. She stood among the crowd, looking up at the notices with interest. But soon she lost interest and turned around. Then she began to pace around the open space, waiting idly as if for a job to come. After a while, she kicked at the small stones on the ground, inadvertently sending them toward the feet of a constable. The constable scolded her, and she quickly apologized. Turning again, she saw a Taoist priest, a juju-bred horse, and a calico cat. They were all covered in dust, staring back at her. Songyu watched her silently, deeply moved. It was true that someone could spend 2 years waiting for a friend, coming every month for a bond of fate. The woman, too, stared at him in surprise. She looked like she was keeping a distance, yet she also seemed to be in disbelief. As a person of the jianghu, she soon broke into a smile and walked over with large strides. "Taoist master, long time no see." The Taoist also greeted her respectfully. "Heroine, long time no see." It had been 2 years of wind and frost since their last farewell. The peach blossoms did not break their spring vow, and neither had an old friend failed to keep their promise. This meeting was as rare and precious as it had been back then. The city walls were towering and majestic, with a bustling scene below. There were commoners discussing among themselves, guards conducting checks, scholars elegantly discussing the spring scenery, and old friends catching up. "Did you come from outside the city? Did you arrive just in time for the first day of the month?" the heroine asked. "Just as planned," Songyu replied. "Why did you arrive so late?" she inquired. "I was delayed on the road," he admitted. The Taoist and the heroine stood face to face at the city gate. "I was worried that you might not come to changing at all, or that you might have come but not sought me out," Heroine Wu said with a smile. "Or perhaps you remembered the wrong gate. I was concerned that you might have forgotten the agreement we made, or that I might have arrived too late, and you would no longer be in changing," Songyu confessed. "Or that you might be here but think I would not come." The heroine tucked her hands into her sleeves and continued chatting with him. "People of the jianghu value trust and integrity. If we didn't have an agreement, that would be another matter. But since we did, how could we easily breach our trust with each other? I had some business to attend to and arrived late that day. By the time I got here, it was already dark and the city gates were about to close. I kept waiting but never saw you, so I suspected you might have come that day, and we just missed each other." "When was that?" Songyu asked. "Last May," she answered. "Then why did you continue coming after that?" "I just had a suspicion. If not, wouldn't I disappoint you?" she continued. "If you could deliver a letter from so far away, surely you wouldn't possibly come to changing and not seek me out." "Indeed." Songyu couldn't help but reflect on how she must have been disappointed many times over the past 2 years, when she had been waiting here every day for a month, and then every first day of the month for over 20 months. "Let's go, let's enter the city." The heroine then led the way into the city. As they walked, she glanced back at his horse and remarked, "Your horse has grown even more beautiful, and its coat is so shiny. What do you feed it?" It seemed like things were much the same as they had been back then. Songyu followed behind her, glancing up at the city gate. He crossed thousands of mountains and rivers to get here. At last, he arrived at changing. \\\\\. As they walked through the bustling streets of Changing, the city displayed its grandeur and prosperity. The streets were crowded with people coming and going and heavy traffic, yet it was different from the busy scene in Anqing County. Anqing County was too small, with narrow streets that were crowded only during the Great Liuzheng gathering. In contrast, Changing had wide avenues and the entire city was immense, still packed with traffic and people. If one looked closely, many faces from the west and even farther lands could be seen, with varied hair colors, skin tones, and eyes. Songyu moved through the city calmly, taking in his surroundings. In this moment, the Great Yan was undeniably a grand empire, and Changing was undoubtedly a magnificent city. Its splendor was dreamlike, boasting the largest area, the most people, the greatest wealth, and the most powerful authority in the known world. There was no one in this era who did not marvel at it. Yet, as Songyu walked through it, he also sensed much demonic aura. It was as if demons and monsters were as enamored with the city's prosperity as the people from distant lands. "You haven't changed much in these 2 years," the heroine said. "You remain as charming as ever," Songyu replied. "Say what you will, I don't even have a mirror to verify your remarks," she joked. "Every word I say is true." Songyu shifted his gaze from Changing to the heroine. Her round face still looked youthful and did not look aged at all. 2 years ago, she had looked young and often hid her face to avoid being underestimated. It seemed that nothing had changed. By the way, where are you staying? Do you have a place to stay? Not yet. This heroine was the only old acquaintance Song Yu had in Changing, making it a perfect opportunity to seek her advice. On the way, I heard that the housing prices in Changing are very high. Do you know if there are any affordable inns or cheaper places to stay? I plan to stay in Changing for a while. How cheap are you talking about? Something comparable to Yidu. Forget about it. Renting or buying a house here is much more expensive than in Yidu, the heroine said with a glance at him. Many people who come to Changing on official business, or even officials who live here, can only rent a more modest place. Even high-ranking officials can't afford to buy property, so you can imagine how expensive it is. I only need a cheap rental. In that case, you might want to look into the rental properties from the Housing Bureau. I rented my place from the right wing of the Housing Bureau. The heroine slowed her pace slightly, scratched her head, and continued. But with the imperial examination going on, their properties might be fully occupied. Plus, as a Taoist with no official business in Changing, it might be difficult to get a place through them. Their properties are usually in high demand. Are there any haunted houses in Changing? Dream on, the heroine laughed. You still don't understand how sought-after housing is in Changing. Even I would consider renting a haunted house if it meant I could secure a place to live. Do you have any other suggestions? Actually, I do if you're willing. Please, go ahead. Heroine Wu said, the place I'm renting was originally rented by a friend of my master when he was young. The rent was paid in advance until next year, but last month he got involved in some trouble and died outside. The place is vacant now. I took over his rental agreement and got the place cleaned up. I was planning to rent it out to someone in the jianghu who wouldn't mind it to earn a bit of extra income. If you can't find anywhere else, you could be my neighbor. When the lease ends, you could talk to the Housing Bureau and perhaps, with a bit of money under the table, you could continue staying there. Song Yu hesitated. Is that okay? Why wouldn't it be? He's dead and has no relatives here, and the agreement is in my hands, so I have the final say, the heroine said with a smirk. However, the place is in the western part of the city, among poor common folk. The house is small, close to the street, and it gets quite noisy in the morning. If you prefer peace and quiet, you might want to look elsewhere. Then I'll accept your offer. Just make sure you don't shortchange me on the rent. It saves me the trouble of finding someone else, which can be quite a hassle. I can offer you a bit of a discount, let's say 1,000 yen per month. Deal. One more thing. I assume you have your own business to attend to, and so do I generally. We'll go about our own affairs. When we meet up, we can have a nice meal together and chat. If you need anything or need help, just let me know. Otherwise, we won't interfere with each other's lives. You don't have to concern yourself with what I'm doing. Understood. By the way, how long do you plan to stay in Changing? Until next year. That works out perfectly. The heroine then led him to her residence. Changing was indeed vast, and it took a long time to navigate through the city. Heroine Wu was a talkative and carefree person, and it didn't take long to dissolve the awkwardness of their 2-year separation. Remarkably, those 2 years of no communication didn't seem to have diminished their connection. They felt even more familiar with each other meeting again now than before. As Song Yu conversed with her, he pondered and looked around. This was the Western District, primarily inhabited by merchants and commoners, with many people from foreign lands also residing here. The place where heroine Wu rented her house was quite remote, almost on the edge of the city. The advantage was that the rent was cheaper. Through the Housing Bureau, it was even more affordable. The area was spacious, and many houses even had a small plot of land where people grew vegetables or raised livestock. Heroine Wu opened her door. Come in. I'll find the key. You can take a look around. The houses here are all quite similar. Ours is considered one of the better ones. It's a 2-story building, and it's not easy to find such a big place in the capital. She continued to rummage through the cabinet while lamenting. When I first came to Changing, I lived in a single-story cottage. That was truly uncomfortable. All right, Song Yu looked around casually. The houses here were all 2-story buildings facing the street, which was convenient for shopping but likely noisy in the morning. Generally, the downstairs was used for cooking and receiving guests, while the upstairs was for sleeping. Even though the space was small, it was well-equipped. This worked fine, too. If it were a whole courtyard, he definitely wouldn't be able to afford it. Even if he could, it would probably have to be shared with several tenants. Living here wasn't as comfortable and serene as the elegant small courtyard in Yidu, but it was not uncomfortable either. It offered a sense of freedom and was closer to the everyday life of the common people, possibly providing a different kind of experience. This place doesn't have space for keeping a horse, but there's a place nearby that specializes in horse boarding. They have boarded many horses and charge reasonable fees. You just need to visit regularly, take the horse out for exercise, and clean it. I can take you there later, Heroine Wu said as she found the key. As they walked outside, Songyu said, I noticed there are many barren mountains outside the city. I'll let the horse roam freely, and I'll look for it later. Will you be able to find it? If fate allows it. What if you can't find it? Then it must have found its own way of life. Heh, Heroine Wu smiled broadly, having opened the door and handed him the key. She didn't enter but leaned against the door, watching him and asking, Have you had dinner? Not yet. Heroine Wu continued to lean by the door. Unfortunately, it's already dark. Recently, the city has been plagued by demons and ghosts, and the palace has imposed a curfew. The guards patrol every day. We'll have to postpone our meal until tomorrow, and I'll host you then. By the way, you'd better bring your horse inside tonight. I happen to have a pot of vegetable porridge left over from yesterday. I'm worried it won't be good by tomorrow. If you don't mind, you can have it to fill your stomach. Songyu said, I still owe you a meal. Right, then you can treat me tomorrow. Do you have any recommendations for good restaurants? There's a lamb soup noodle place down the street that's quite good. Lamb soup noodles. What's wrong? Don't you eat lamb? It's too simple. Isn't it good enough if it's tasty? I owe you a good meal. Oh, Heroine Wu, leaning by the door, thought for a moment and said, Then I'll add 2 more slices of lamb. Songyu couldn't help but smile. It seemed that the heroine noticed that Songyu had just arrived in Xianxia and that his finances might be a bit tight. She couldn't bear to have him spend too much money. Her response was quite charming, and not wishing to argue further, Songyu decided to save up a bit more money and take her to the legendary Yunchun restaurant for a meal. It was already dark. Heroine Wu brought an oil lamp so he could settle into the house. By the time he finished tidying up, the vegetable porridge was already warmed up. The so-called vegetable porridge was just chopped vegetables cooked with rice, without any other flavors. It seemed to be something the heroine usually ate, and it was not suitable for receiving guests. But under these circumstances, she didn't feel embarrassed about taking it out to make do for a friend. Each of them had a bowl of porridge and sipped it. The porridge was steaming hot and quite comforting. By the time he finished drinking, he had raised the bowl and tilted his head back with an open heart. Even the thin porridge tasted like a delicacy. Only the cat refused to eat it, looking around with its head up. It was already aware of the world inside the walls and underground nearby, pondering whether to eat from its own home or someone else's tonight. The oil lamp's light struggled to fill the room upstairs. The Calico cat scurried around the wooden floor, sniffing left and right. Meanwhile, Songyu stood in the center of the room, looking around. The room upstairs was quite spacious. The wooden floor creaked with every step, and in some places it even squeaked. There was a wooden bed and a table with a small stool, all made from the same kind of wood and similar in color. They were likely the original furnishings and were sufficient for daily use. There was also a wide bench, which was clearly a later addition. It was probably purchased and put here at a later time by the current tenant. The previous tenant had left some bedding behind, which Heroine Wu hadn't removed or discarded. She likely intended to leave it for the next tenant, possibly to increase the rent a little with this. However, Songyu noticed an unpleasant smell on it and decided not to use it. For tonight, he would use a woolen mat to sleep on and cover himself with a fleece blanket and thin quilt. He planned to go buy new bedding tomorrow and wash and store the woolen mat and blanket for future use. They might come in handy when he traveled east and north after leaving Xianxia, and they might prove useful for many years to come. Looking around, he thought the space by the window would be suitable for a long couch with a low tea table in the middle and a cloth mat for sitting. This way, he could enjoy tea, write, and watch the street scene from the window. He could also hang a curtain to divide the room and buy a small bed for the Calico cat to sleep on. After a bit of planning, he had a mental image of how the room would look. With these additions, the room would be quite nice. A soft, delicate voice came from behind. Is this going to be our home for the next year? Pretty much. Are you going to sleep now? Why? I'm going out to catch mice. Make sure you recognize which room we're staying in when you come back. I'm very clever. If you encounter other Taoists, monks, monsters, or patrolling gods who trouble you, just say you're from Hidden Dragon Temple and that you're merely out to catch mice. Got it. Go then. Songyu took out the old paper package from the bedding bag and unwrapped the brush, ink, paper, and inkstone on the table. Upon arriving in Xianxia today, there were many things he had to remember. But the Calico cat, which had just said it was going to catch mice, suddenly sprang up from under the table just as he laid out the paper on the table. When asked, it only said it would catch mice later. But as soon as Song Yu started grinding the ink and picked up the brush to write, the cat reached over and played with the brush's tassel as it lay entirely sprawled on the table. So it seemed they had temporarily settled in changing. \\\\. The room seemed a bit drafty, with a chill in the air. In the middle of the night, the sound of patrolling soldiers' heavy footsteps and the clinking of armor could be heard. Meanwhile, the streets were noisy in the morning. Despite this, he slept well that night. He couldn't remember when the Calico cat had returned or whether it had caught any mice and had a good meal. Song Yu had previously established a routine with her. Generally, she would finish eating the mice outside before coming back, leaving any unwanted parts outside as well. When she came back to bed, she would clean herself up and wipe her paws on a wet cloth placed at the bed's headboard. Since hearing that woolen mats and blankets were expensive, she seemed to value them even more than Song Yu did, carefully cleaning her paws before getting into bed each time. When he got up, he didn't see her. After dressing and going downstairs, he still couldn't find her. It wasn't until he opened the door that he discovered she was lying in the street, basking in the sun with her eyes half closed. Passers-by carefully avoided stepping near her as she clearly enjoyed herself. The door next to his was tightly shut and locked. Song Yu went back into the house, let the horse out, and quickly freshened up. After locking the door, he led the horse out of the city. As soon as the Calico cat opened her eyes, she leaped up and trotted after him with small steps. The man and the cat walked together, making sure to remember the route to avoid getting lost later. Until they left the city, there were still many houses on both sides of the road. There were inns and shops of various kinds, making it quite lively. However, as they continued, the houses became sparser. After crossing the small slope from yesterday and taking a small path, they finally reached the desolate mountains. In the distance, a large mountain could be seen. Song Yu patted the juju-bred horse and said apologetically, "Our place in Changing is cramped, and keeping a horse there is inconvenient. Even if I were to send you to a horse sitter, you'd likely be miserable. It's better for you to run freely and graze in the wild. Please try your best to head toward the depths of that mountain, where people rarely go. Don't wander too far. I will come to find you in a year." The juju-bred horse merely snorted in response, "PFFDTTT." Song Yu removed the bell from the horse's neck and replaced it with a red string. On the string was a small tag, similar to the one the Calico cat had, which was also a piece torn off from the plaque of the hidden dragon temple. "You already have some spirituality in you. I believe ordinary people won't be able to trouble you now. With this tag, even those with cultivation skills will probably find it difficult to bother you," Song Yu said, pausing for a moment. "If you find freedom in the wild more comfortable, then go and seek your freedom. If you wander farther, I won't come looking for you." "Nay," the juju-bred horse lifted its neck and neighed. Song Yu merely smiled, not feeling the need to restrict it with words. A fleeting thought might not last forever. A horse should run freely in the wild, and it had waited for him for a year at Yunding Mountain. But this time, he told the horse in advance. After all, it might change its mind if it found other wild horses to play with after staying in the wild for a long time. The Calico cat behind him also raised its right front paw, touching the horse's hooves. It raised its head high, expressing a different opinion from Song Yu's. "Horsey, wait for us to find you." "Go on," Song Yu patted it gently. The horse ran a few steps, looked back at them, and then galloped toward the distant mountain. While the Calico cat seemed especially reluctant to watch it leave, Song Yu only smiled. Reuniting with the horse would be great, but if they didn't reunite, it wouldn't be bad either. The outcome a year from now was bound to be positive, so there was no need to feel anxious. "Let's head back." With this, the man and the cat turned and walked back. The Calico cat looked back repeatedly until the juju-bred horse was completely out of sight. Only then did it turn its gaze back and look up at Song Yu. "Will it grow bigger next year?" "It has already grown." "Will it grow even bigger?" "It won't." This morning, the woman next door said she was going out and would only return in the afternoon. She asked you to wait for her at home early tonight so you can go out for a meal. "Did she tell you that?" "Yes." "Lady Calico, you're starting to take charge, eh?" "I'm taking charge indeed." "Right. What does that mean?" "It means you're smart and reliable." "That's right." Then, the man and the cat slowly made their way back to the official road. Yesterday, perhaps due to the late hour or preoccupations in his mind, he hadn't paid close attention to the scenery outside the city. Today, however, the view revealed a flat expanse with winding dirt roads. Along these winding roads, there were scattered homes, some sparse and some dense. It was early spring, and most plants were withered, but the peach blossoms were in full bloom. From a distance, people appeared as small dots, with horse riders and carriage drivers being slightly larger. Occasional wisps of smoke rose, and inn banners fluttered. Together, this scenery looked like an ancient painting. Just then, Songyu stepped into this picturesque scene. Children chased after small dogs, and cats darted around on the roads, while literati and scholars strolled out together to enjoy the spring. Elders sat at their doorsteps awaiting the passage of time, and lower-class folks labored tirelessly at their trades. He had lunch at a street stall outside the city. Even inside the city gate, the scene was much the same. The bustling main streets were filled with vendors calling out their wares and crowds of people. Among them were those dressed in fine clothes, as well as elegant young men and beautiful young women. After Song Yu turned around and walked into the alleyways, he saw artisans quietly weaving bamboo baskets and brooms, their blackened hands thick with calluses and deep cracks. Laborers carried heavy loads in silence, while women sat at their doorsteps, worried about the day's troubles. Everything here depicted the myriad facets of life. Song Yu walked with measured steps, as if moving through an ancient painting or history itself. He planned to explore more thoroughly on another day. Today, he had other tasks to complete. Song Yu returned to his newly rented house, bought rice and flour from a nearby market to fill his rice and flour bins, then drew water from a nearby well to clean and refill the water jar. After that, he bought a load of firewood from a woodcutter selling at the alleyway to ensure he had fuel for cooking. He also needed to buy oil, salt, soy sauce, and vinegar, and new bedding. After spending half a day sending off the horse, he had spent another half day completing these chores. Yet, with every moment occupied with tasks, it left him with a sense of fulfillment. This was the life of an ordinary person. When he finished his tasks, it was close to the evening. The setting sun cast its light across the street. The remaining time was his own. Song Yu took a stool and sat at the door with the Calico cat, basking in the sun while watching the myriad of people passing by on the road and observing the clouds change shapes in the sky, savoring this moment of contentment. A neighbor cast a glance at him. \\\\. As the sunlight turned the floor tiles to gold, Wu Xiuwei wandered over from the end of the street and immediately spotted the large and small figures sitting at the door. The larger one had his arms crossed, eyes squinted as the sunlight illuminated his face. Without seeing his face, one might think he was an old man. The smaller one sat properly on the ground beside him, also squinting and occasionally licking its paw. This made her feel as if she was a newcomer to changing, while the person and cat seemed to have been here for many years. While others enjoyed life, she was busy working for a living, which made her feel a bit envious. Yet, she couldn't help but smile at the beauty of the moment. "Hey, sunbathing, huh?" The cat had long noticed her and had stopped licking its paw to stare at her. Only then did the Taoist turn his head. "Back already? You two seem quite comfortable. There's nothing much to do. Did you send off the horse?" "Yes, it's gone." "Have you finished tidying up the house? Bought everything you needed?" "I've bought most of the urgent things. And the non-urgent items. I'll buy those slowly." Tusk tusk, Wu Xiuwei took out her keys and opened her own door. She didn't do much inside. She simply pulled out the short sword hidden in her clothing and tossed it onto the table before turning back around. At this moment, she noticed that the cat had somehow already made its way to her doorstep, staring up at her with a contemplative look in its eyes. "Heh," Wu Xiuwei grinned and stepped back out before she closed the door behind her. Chapter 107, The Rumor About the Swordsman. At a street-side stall, 2 bowls of mutton soup noodles with added meat were served, with the two seated opposite each other. The Taoist had brought an extra bowl and placed it on the nearby stool, where a calico cat was crouching on. Heroine Wu slurped the soup noodle and said, "Ah, though we of the Zishan sect are based in Yizhu, we're still a major sect in the jianghu, so we have some connections in changing. When I first arrived, I used the connections of an old friend of my master to get a job with the Yangning escort agency. But it was tough work, and I felt it had no future. I worked there for about a year, and last summer and fall, I happened to meet a benefactor. Now I'm working for that benefactor, and I'm thinking that I might be on my way to success." Song Yu asked, "Didn't you say you had no acquaintances in changing?" "That was my master's acquaintance, not mine originally. But he's quite loyal and has helped me a lot. Without him, I might not have managed to gain a foothold in changing at the beginning and be where I am now." She shook her head. "It's a pity that just as I was preparing to repay him and bring him to work for the benefactor, he passed away. Sigh. At his age, he still chased after wealth and treasures like the others, it's really." "So, you're like a retainer." "Close enough." "That's not too bad. Being a retainer to a noble in the capital usually meant a leisurely life with fewer fights, good food and clothing, and a decent income. It was a better fate for many jianghu martial artists. Not many jianghu people, who wanted to leave behind the chaos of their former lives and settle down, could get such a great job. However, it was clear that this woman was not a retainer. Song Yu didn't press further. He passed all the thin slices of lamb from his soup noodle to the calico cat with his chopsticks and asked quietly, "Do you remember the swordsman from the great Liuzheng gathering?" "Which one?" Heroine Wu looked up at him. "Xu Yifan." "Yes." "How could I forget?" Heroine Wu lowered her head. She blew on her soup noodle before she took a bite and said, "In the past year, he has gained great fame in the jianghu. Unless someone is very out of touch with the latest news, they would have heard of him." "I heard about him on the way here." "Who told you?" "Some jianghu person at a tea stall, a storyteller." "Is it true that they're all saying he's the #1 swordsman in the world?" "That's what the storyteller said." "Storytellers like to rank such things, but these rankings don't mean anything. It wouldn't be surprising if one day some unknown person defeated the so-called #1 swordsman," Heroine Wu said. "But Xu Yifan did make quite a stir last year in Jeju, so his fame is not without reason." "Tell me more." "Don't you want the meat?" Wu Xue realized he had given all the meat to the calico cat. "It's fine." "Heth, this story goes back to a major event in the jianghu from 20 years ago. I heard this from others. 20 years ago, there was a family with the surname Fei. They were wiped out by Lin Dihai from the Hanjiang sect of Jeju after a night of drinking." Heroine Wu shook her head and continued, "Outsiders make it seem like such incidents are common in the jianghu, but in reality, they're very rare. We've only ever heard of such things in stories. Moreover, if such massacres are handled badly, the authorities won't let you off easily. So back then, it shocked the entire jianghu." "Was Xu Yifan, originally, a member of the Fei family?" "How did you know?" "But yes, Xu Yifan was originally from the Fei family. He was the sole survivor. The Hanjiang sect is the largest jianghu faction in Jeju. Lin Dihai was also the most formidable person in Jeju, known for never having been defeated in his travels with his cold iron ghost-headed saber." Heroine Wu temporarily set down her chopsticks and said, "Many people said he was the #1 swordsman in the world. This man was extremely arrogant. When he wiped out the Fei family, he left only the Fei family's son alive and told him to train hard and seek revenge. Now, after 20 years of hard training, that child has grown up and actually returned to exact his revenge." She paused for a moment and then added, "At the great Liuzheng gathering, I had initially wanted to spar with him. On the one hand, I felt I probably wouldn't be able to beat him and feared losing face. On the other hand, I sensed something was off about him." "What was off about him?" "He specifically targeted people who used sabers." "Really?" Song Yu only then realized this detail. "You see," Heroine Wu said, "he didn't just come with great martial skills, he also came well prepared." "What happened next?" As if she were even more enthusiastic than when she first heard it, Heroine Wu recounted with gusto. "Later, I heard he took advantage of Lin Dihai's arrogance. The Hanjiang sect is a major faction in Jeju, with no less than 80 skilled members. Even if Xu Yifan was indeed the #1 swordsman in the world, it would be impossible for him to challenge the entire Hanjiang sect alone with just one sword. But guess what? He sent a letter directly, telling Lin Dihai that he was coming for him and asking him to be ready." Song Yu asked, "Did he disband his disciples?" "Something like that," Heroine Wu sighed. "I heard that happened on a stormy night during last year's Jingsh. Yet the flash of knives and swords was even brighter than the fierce thunder and lightning." Song Yu could almost visualize the scene in his mind. On a cold rainy night with lightning and thunder, Lin Dihai, the #1 person in Jeju, wielded the cold iron ghost-headed saber and annihilated an entire family but left one boy alive to seek revenge. He must have believed himself to be invincible in the world, obsessed with martial arts and filled with pride. The young swordsman, burdened with a blood feud, had trained hard for years. He prepared thoroughly, with courage as deep as the sea and sword energy sweeping through autumn, capable of slicing even demons and evil spirits with ease. If the jianghu had a history book, this battle would undoubtedly be recorded in its annals. What happened next? Isn't it all well known by now? Heroine Wu picked up her bowl and continued, "But Lin Dihai had an illegitimate son with his mistress. The year before last, he brought that woman back and took her as his concubine. So at home, besides the servants, it was just him and his wife, his concubine and his son. He probably never thought he would lose and didn't send them away." She paused here. Her chopsticks clanged against the bowl as she almost finished the entire bowl of soup noodles. Then she said, "Guess what Xu Yifan did?" "Do you want another bowl?" "Yes," So they ordered another bowl, still with extra meat. Heroine Wu said with a laugh. Everyone thought he would repay him in kind, and it was almost like that. He also left Lin Dihai's son alive, telling him his surname and name, and advised him to train hard in martial arts so that he could seek revenge for his father's murder when he grew up. This man is also filled with pride. No wonder the storyteller praises him so highly, but he didn't kill Lin Dihai's women. Song Yu nodded. I see. Do you think I tell it better than those storytellers? Yes. Aren't you a Taoist? You enjoy listening to these stories. I can get a taste of the jianghu essence. What jianghu essence? We're all just a bunch of miserable people. If we could make a better living, who would want to do this kind of work? Oh, except for those mentally disturbed individuals. Heroine Wu shook her head and focused on eating her soup noodles. Song Yu also lowered his head to eat, with half a bowl remaining. This lamb soup noodles was also made with wide noodles, but unlike the 3-finger wide noodles from Southern Art County, these were stretched out and were only about 1 finger wide and thinner. The lamb bone broth, combined with coriander, scallions, and a few slices of thinly cut lamb meat, had quite a rich flavor. With careful tasting, one could even detect a hint of spices in the broth. Right, this was the Western District. Many merchants from the West were here, and they saw quite a few on the streets during the day. The West Market might have the most diverse spices in all of Great Yan, and he wondered what the prices were like. When he had some time, he should explore more. Unlike Song Yu's leisurely pace, the Jianghu people tend to eat quickly, as if someone were competing with them. By the time Heroine Wu finished her second bowl, Song Yu had only just finished his half bowl. Full? Of course. Still want another bowl. I don't have that much room in my stomach. Besides, it's getting dark. I haven't heard any news about the curfew being lifted. We should head back. Heroine Wu stood up. Let's settle the bill. Okay. Song Yu then paid the bill. The total turned out to be quite a few dozen wen. The 3 of them, 2 people and a cat, walked back along the street, which was now almost deserted. This area couldn't compare to the lively, bustling streets known for their nightlife or entertainment. At night, there was little illumination, with only a strip of fiery red on the horizon, which then blended into a beautiful gradient. The eaves of the ancient buildings on both sides and the smooth, stone-paved ground occasionally reflected these colors. Walking among them, one felt a sense of tranquility. There are curfews these days, shops close early. Once it gets dark, there aren't many people out. Usually there would be more people, and a few shops would still be open. Why the curfew? It's because of the demons. Even under the Emperor's nose, demons are so rampant. Even under the Emperor's nose, there are daily murders. The constables in Changing are probably the busiest in the world. Even humans can kill people, let alone demons. And demons are even more powerful and harder to catch, making them even more likely to cause trouble. Have there been any murders? Not just murders. They've killed high-ranking officials, and not just one. Otherwise, it wouldn't have caused such a big commotion. I heard that Changing has a city god. It's not effective. Song Yu furrowed his brow slightly. Don't be surprised, Heroine Wu chuckled. It's the same everywhere. The more people there are, the more money there is, the more complicated the power struggles are, and the more chaotic it becomes. It happens even under the Emperor's nose. But if the Emperor weren't here, it might not be this chaotic. Is that so? I didn't say anything. Right. We should speak more quietly. Otherwise, if someone hears us, we might have to face some trouble. Anyway, you should rest up. Until the army and local officials sort things out, it's best not to go out at night. Make sure to close your windows tightly, and don't go out to check if you hear any noises at night. Even if you're capable, it's better to avoid unnecessary risks. Since you've come to Changing, take the time to explore and enjoy the city's splendor. That sounds reasonable, Song Yu nodded. After a pause, he added, I've spent most of my money on the road. Do you happen to know any good ways for a Taoist like me to make money? Heroine Wu looked at him with curiosity. The Calico cat, happily prancing ahead with small steps, turned its head to look back as well. Heroine Wu seemed interested, a smile tugging at her lips as she pondered for a while. I don't really know how someone like you makes money. I haven't seen other masters in need of money. Let me think. Got it, you must know some spells, right? Like that trick in Yidu where people steal money out of thin air. Can you do that? If you can, I can take you to a corrupt official's house. I don't have that ability. Then what can you do? Fortune-telling. You could go find some high-ranking officials. I think that could earn you some money. I don't have that skill either. Then what are your skills? Oh, I remember now. The woman slapped her forehead and slowed her pace. You make great beef stew. I've traveled far and wide, and I love eating more than anything. But out of everything I've tasted along the way, your beef ranks among the best. You should open a shop. Just use the first floor as a storefront and sell beef exclusively. I know where to get the best beef. I do excel in cooking, but running a restaurant is too laborious. I'm already quite tired from traveling. Recently, I've been feeling quite lazy. Perhaps someday if I feel like being more hardworking, I'll consider opening a shop as you suggested. Then what else can you do? Exorcise spirits, subdue demons. How skilled are you in that? Very skilled. There are often bounties and wanted notices at the city gate. Some are for demons and ghosts causing trouble nearby or in the city, and they're searching for a master to ward them off. You could check them out when you have time. Heroine Wu paused for a moment. She continued, but these tasks are either very difficult or troublesome with little reward. If it were easy, the temples in the city and the Taoist temples outside, not to mention the many civilian cultivators, would have already taken care of it. Even among jianghu warriors like us, who have great courage and vitality, we can usually only deal with a few minor demons for some extra money. Did you see anything interesting at the city gate yesterday? Oh, Heroine Wu scratched her head. I'm not very good with words. I just saw that everyone was looking, so out of boredom I pretended to look too. If you want to know the specifics, you'll have to check it out yourself. Got it. We've arrived. Farewell then. We're neighbors, don't be so formal. I'll hear you walking around upstairs if you make any noise. Heroine Wu grinned from ear to ear. I just hope you don't snore. If you do, keep it down. All right. The two of them each opened their own doors. Chapter 108. How can he resist the urge to pick her up? The window on the second floor was wide open, and the night breeze filled the room. There was no moon outside, only a sky full of stars. The scattered starlight gathered on the ground. After his eyes adjusted to the nighttime light, Song Yu could make out shapes and objects. While he couldn't see the subtle movements on the ground or far away, he could discern the outline of the city. The roof eaves stretched far into the distance, blending into the darkness, creating a serene beauty. A soft voice came from behind. What are you looking at? I heard there are demons causing trouble in this city, Song Yu replied, leaning by the window without turning around. Did you see any demons walking around last night while you were out exploring, Lady Calico? I didn't see any. A shadow leaped up beside him. Lady Calico perched on the window ledge, stretching out its body as it said, but there were many people on the street, and they made a rustling sound as they walked. That's the patrol. The patrol. The Imperial Guards. The Imperial Guards. They are the human army guarding the city. I haven't asked yet. It's fine. But I did feel that there were demons far away while walking on the roof last night, but they were too far off, and I didn't dare to run over and check. Keep your distance from them. Are you looking for demons? I'm just casually checking. Did you find any? Of course not, Song Yu said softly. Maybe it's because this place is too poor and the demons don't want to come here. Too poor. Lady Calico, do you think it would be good to buy a long couch and place it here? The couch would be about this high. I'll place a tea table in the middle, roughly this high. Song Yu gestured the height next to the window, the highest point of the tea table barely reaching below the window. He continued, this way, it will be more convenient for us to enjoy the view from the window, and you won't have to jump onto the ledge every time. I won't fall off. But the tea table can be used for lying down. I saw some people sitting on rocking chairs. They looked like a lot of fun. You like those, huh? Song Yu turned his head to assess the upstairs space by the dim light, feeling that it could fit. Do those things cost a lot of money? We can only know after we go see. Lady Calico turned to look at him closely. Don't we have any money left? A little bit. Just a little bit. I guess. Is it impossible for humans to get by without money? The question made Song Yu pause and think deeply. It wasn't fully true that people couldn't live without money. In these times, many people in remote areas used very little money throughout the year. Some didn't use money at all. When they needed salt, they carried goods down the mountain to trade. For the rest of the time, they lived self-sufficiently, leading a very primitive life. But saying that this perspective was incorrect also seemed not quite right. In the novels about heroic figures in the jianghu, a mere wen could sometimes become an obstacle, and many in the jianghu toiled endlessly for money. Even the cultivators revered by everyone, apart from a few mountain recluses or orthodox ascetic monks, still needed money to varying degrees. The reason there was a hidden dragon temple on Yinyang Mountain, and why so many petulant temple owners over the generations hadn't torn it down despite their capriciousness, was precisely because the temple offered the convenience of interacting with the mundane world. When they were feeling lazy, they could even rely on it to collect some income from incense offering and live an idle life. Song Yu, too, needed money to travel in the human realm. However, the jianghu people were often carefree, splurging their money on wine while they had it and enduring hunger without complaint when they didn't. In contrast, Taoists had a calm and indifferent nature. If they had money, they lived a little better. If they didn't, they just made do with what little they had and didn't mind at all. After thinking for a while, he simply said, "I guess." The little cat's brow furrowed instantly. It was clearly a cat's face, but for a moment, it seemed to show a hint of sorrow. "What should we do?" "Make money." "How?" "Find a way. I saw someone selling kittens on the street when I was out exploring during the day." Lady Calico lifted its chin and pointed in a direction. "Him? You could sell me." Xianxia couldn't help but smile. "Lady Calico, you know that's not possible." "You could sell me, and when you get the money and leave far away, I could sneak away and come find you." "That's not right. Can catching mice make money?" "I'm not sure." Xianxia reached out and patted its head. "We're just short of money, not no money at all. Besides, not having money won't lead to starvation. Lady Calico, you don't need to worry about that." "We won't starve." "We won't." "Oh." Under no circumstances should one make money through stealing, robbing, or cheating. But Lady Calico, you're an upright cat, so I'm sure you wouldn't need me to explain this simple principle. "Right. You're indeed upright. The woman next door was eavesdropping on us." "It doesn't matter." She quietly went back. "It doesn't matter. She's now in bed." "Stop eavesdropping." "My ears heard it by themselves." "Let's go to sleep." Xianxia picked Lady Calico up from the windowsill. The room was quiet for a moment before Lady Calico's voice sounded. "What are you doing? Put me down." \\\\. On the third day after arriving and changing, Xianxia woke up early. This time he happened to encounter the heroine leaving. She was still dressed in thick, dark gray clothing, which was probably convenient for carrying weapons. When she saw Xianxia while closing the door, she let out a few awkward laughs, seeming a bit embarrassed. "Haha, did you sleep well last night?" "Quite well. I thought I heard someone talking next door last night. I wasn't sure if it was you or the neighbor on the other side. I listened closely from both sides, and it seemed like it was coming from your side." "It's no problem." "Are you heading out?" "Why, yes, I'm going out to work." "Take care." "Thank you." The woman locked the door and turned to leave. The morning was foggy, and her dark clothing quickly made her hard to see. It was unclear what she was up to so early. The heroine's remarks the day before had been quite apt. Everyone had their own tasks to attend to, and they should maintain a certain distance even if they were old acquaintances. Therefore, Xianxia wasn't interested in knowing her plans. Once she was out of sight, he turned his attention back to his own tasks and calmly began preparing breakfast. He cooked a pot of gruel. He went to the meat shop at the east end of the street to buy a small amount of minced meat of just a tail and some green vegetables. When it was finely chopped and the gruel was just the right consistency, he tossed them all in, and now he had a pot of minced meat and vegetable gruel. After finishing his meal, he asked a neighbor where he could find old wooden furniture. With the cat in tow, he headed in that direction. It seemed he might have taken a wrong turn, but it was no big deal. When one had time to spare, no path was a detour. Suddenly, someone stopped him. It was a middle-aged man with a long beard, dressed in a Taoist robe, holding a fortune-telling banner that doubled as both a banner and a walking stick. He started speaking as soon as he saw Xianxia. "Sir, I see you glancing around anxiously, your eyes troubled, and you seem to be plagued by misfortune. Recently, your endeavors might not be favorable. If you are here for the imperial examination, why not have your fortune told? I am skilled in fortune-telling, including palm reading and divination. Knowing what's to come can give you some assurance." Xianxia turned to look at him. The cat, Lady Calico, also looked up at him. The divination banner was composed of a wooden staff and a banner with only one character on it, Jai. This word was similar to the one on the inn banner, which read Jiu, and was a signature of the fortune tellers in Great Yan. Xianxia looked at his own clothes and then smiled, cupping his hands in greeting. "Fellow Taoist, I am also a Tao cultivator. I am not an examinee coming to the capital. I'm just out today without my Taoist robe." "Official, why are you deceiving this old man?" "I speak the truth. Fellow Taoist, please seek business elsewhere." "Fine then." The fortune teller shook his head and walked away. As Xianxia continued on his way, he encountered several more fortune-tellers like this. In Great Yan, fortune-telling, divination, and dream interpretation were quite popular. This was especially true with the court's endorsement of Taoism. The current state preceptor was renowned for his divination and fortune-telling skills, so fortune-tellers were numerous in Changing. Besides these basic, traveling fortune-tellers, There were also stationary fortune tellers who set up stalls or even tents on the street, each hanging a banner with the character Jai so that people could easily see what they were offering. The best established ones even had their own shops in busy areas, with lines of people, including scholars and officials, seeking their advice. Indeed, the imperial examinations were approaching. In Great Yan, people liked to consult fortune tellers before important events like examinations or travels. Now that many examinees had gathered in Changing, it was likely that fortune tellers from neighboring counties and commanderies, or even those who usually engaged in other trades, had donned fortune tellers' robes to make money from these out-of-town examinees. The government was lax about such businesses and was unable to distinguish between genuine and false fortune tellers, so they dared not offend them. This gave Song-yu some insight. He then continued searching for places selling old furniture. Along the way, he occasionally overheard discussions about the recent shocking news. The vice minister of the Ministry of Works had been devoured by a demon at home. This news had alarmed the entire court and the populace. Especially since the demon had yet to be captured, common people were unsettled, and the dark forces and monsters seemed emboldened and more active. The imperial examinations were near. With the cat in tow, Song-yu walked through bustling marketplaces and narrow alleys. His pace was leisurely compared to the hurried passers-by, as if he scorned time itself. He walked, looked, and listened. He absorbed the stories of Changing and observed the lives of its people. By the afternoon, he had finally bought a satisfactory long bench, a tea table with cushions, and an old rocking chair. He had spent quite a bit of money. He also bought a few shop banners. Upon returning home, Song-yu took out his writing materials. He wrote the word Dao on one piece of paper and slanted it against the door, placing it outward to attract attention. On the other two long banners, he wrote the specific services he was offering and hung them on either side of the front door: exorcism and rodent extermination. Song-yu looked at his handiwork with satisfaction. He then turned to Lady Calico and said, "If someone comes to the shop for exorcism, that's my job. If someone comes seeking help with rodent extermination, it will be up to you, Lady Calico." Meow. I don't know. Song-yu smiled. Whether it was helping people with their misfortunes, driving away evil spirits, or dealing with rodents and pests, it was all considered good work. As for Lady Calico's question on how much money they could make, he didn't know yet. Much of it depended on the customers. Wealthy and generous ones might give more, while the poor and less fortunate might offer less. Earning more meant better meals, while earning less meant simpler fare. It was just a different way of living, a new perspective on the world.